Everyone thinks they know Ron Howard, but the truth is hidden behind the quiet way he moves through Hollywood. To the public, Ron has always been seen as one of the calmest people in the film industry. He started his career as a child actor on The Andy Griffith Show and later became the friendly teenager on Happy Days. People grew up watching him, so they felt close to him. When he stepped behind the camera, that same gentle image followed him. Directors are often known for shouting, demanding, and controlling every detail. But Ron was different. He listened, he smiled, he treated everyone kindly. Over time, Hollywood began calling him one of the nicest men in the business. Because of this reputation, many actors and studios felt safe working with him. They believed he could handle stress without losing control. They believed he would always stay patient. This image became almost like a myth, a director who never raised his voice, a leader who always stayed calm, a man who avoided drama, arguments, and conflict. To many people, that sounded like peace. But in Hollywood, peace can attract storms. When a person is known for being patient, others may try to push past their limits. Some actors respected Ron's approach. Others tested it. Ron was not weak. He was careful. He believed movies were a team effort, not a battlefield. He believed respect should guide the set. But even the calmest person can only carry so much weight. Behind the short laughs in interviews and polite words at award shows, there were moments of stress, pressure, and emotional struggle that the public never saw. The film industry is full of strong personalities, and not all of them fit beside Ron's style. There were times when kindness was not enough, times when patience was tested, times when his values clashed with someone else's behavior or ego. What most people never heard is that Ron, the director known for peace, has a list of actors he quietly decided he would never work with. Again, not because he hated them as people, but because the experience of working with them changed him. These encounters shaped him, challenged him, and left marks that stayed. So what could push a man like that to the breaking point? Let's start with the actor who nearly tore a masterpiece apart. Russell Crowe. Some actors bring emotion to a role. Russell Crowe brought war. When Ron Howard first worked with Crowe on A Beautiful Mind, there was respect between them. Crowe was already known as a strong, intense actor. He took his roles seriously, sometimes too seriously. Ron admired Crowe's dedication. He believed that passion could help the film. During A Beautiful Mind, the tension between them was quiet and controlled. They did not argue openly, but there were signs. Crowe often questioned how scenes were planned. He asked why certain shots were done a certain way. He challenged timing and tone. Ron listened because he believed in teamwork, and for the most part, the film stayed steady. But even then, the seeds of conflict were already there. Everything changed on their next project, Cinderella Man. This time, the tension did not stay quiet. It grew. The story required emotional depth, physical effort, and heavy dramatic moments. Crowe approached the character with full force. He wanted control over how every moment was filmed. Ron wanted to guide the film in an organized, planned way so that every part made sense. But Crowe did not like being guided. He questioned Ron constantly. Not in a polite or calm way, but in a forceful tone that made everyone around uncomfortable. The more emotional the scenes became, the harder it was for the two to work together smoothly. Crowe questioned blocking, which is the movement of actors during a scene. He would stop in the middle of filming and ask to redo everything because he felt the character would move differently. He questioned the lighting, telling the crew to shift equipment even after Ron had approved the setup. He questioned pacing, saying the scene felt wrong if the energy did not match his personal reading of the moment. What Ron planned carefully, Crowe challenged. And he did it constantly. It was not one or two disagreements, it was daily. The crew felt the pressure. People began speaking more, carefully around Crowe, afraid he might react strongly. Some avoided giving suggestions because they did not want to be in the middle of another argument. Ron tried to stay calm. He always believed that patience helped build trust. But with Crowe, patience only gave more room for conflict. Crowe's intensity filled the space. It became heavy. Even when he was not speaking, his presence made everyone feel tense. Instead of a team working together, the set felt like two leaders pulling in different directions at the same time. The hardest moments came during the boxing scenes. These scenes required timing, rhythm, and camera movement to be exact. Crowe wanted emotional pain to guide the performance. Ron needed technical precision to keep the shots clean and clear. One day, during a long sequence, Crowe yelled across the ring, telling Ron he did not understand the character's suffering. The whole set went silent. Ron did not yell back. He never did. But inside, he was frustrated. He had spent months planning that film. He cared deeply about telling the story well. To have the lead actor question his understanding felt like a deep wound. After that day, things did not get better. Crowe continued pushing, and Ron continued trying to manage the project without falling apart. Crowe asked for entire monologues to be reshot because he did not feel the emotion. Ron tried to explain the schedule could not support endless retakes, but Crowe insisted the production slowed down. Every delay affected the crew and the budget. Ron carried the stress quietly, but everyone saw the change in his face. He looked tired. He looked older. The calm director was being pushed to his emotional limit. Even when the movie was completed and praised, the experience had taken something out of Ron. When interviewers asked whether he would work with Crowe again, Ron always gave a polite answer, but the meaning was clear. He was done. Crowe later admitted that the two had very different working styles. He said that sometimes their methods could not blend. It was an honest statement, but it did not undo the damage. For Ron, Cinderella Man became a reminder that not every talented person fits every team. He learned that even great performances can come with a heavy personal cost. He did not hate Crowe. He respected his ability. But he knew he could not go through that kind of experience again. The emotional weight was too heavy. The stress changed him. He began to understand that being calm did not mean accepting everything. Sometimes protecting your peace means walking away, even from someone brilliant. And just when Ron thought he'd faced the hardest personality of his career, he met someone even more unpredictable. Jim Carrey. The funniest man in Hollywood brought anything but joy. When Jim Carrey agreed to play the Grinch in How the Grinch Stole Christmas, everyone expected a light-hearted production. Jim was known for comedy, improvisation, and high energy. Ron Howard thought he would bring humor and life to the film. What Ron did not expect was how deeply the Grinch costume would affect Jim mentally and emotionally. The green suit was heavy, tight, and uncomfortable. The makeup process took around 8 hours every single day. Jim had to sit completely still, while layers of latex and paint were applied to his face and body. At first, Jim tried to handle it with patience. But as days turned into weeks, patience began to disappear. The long hours in the makeup chair made Jim frustrated. He could not move freely. He felt trapped. He later said the suit felt like being inside a rubber coffin. The heat, the smell of the materials, and the pressure on his skin made him feel stressed and restless. Once filming began, this stress came out in unpredictable ways. Some days Jim arrived on set joking and friendly. Other days he was angry and difficult to talk to. Nobody knew which version would show up. The crew learned to be cautious around him. Small mistakes or delays could set him off. It wasn't because Jim wanted to be rude. It was because the costume was affecting his mind and patience. Ron tried to stay calm through all of this. He understood that acting under such conditions was not easy. He tried to give Jim space, time, and encouragement. But the production schedule could not wait forever. The movie was expensive, and every delay cost money. Jim sometimes walked off set because he felt he could not take the pressure anymore. There were days when the team could not film anything because Jim was too overwhelmed to continue. Ron had to talk to the studio and explain what was happening. He tried to protect Jim, but he also had to protect the movie. At one point, things were so serious that Jim said he might quit the film. If that happened, the entire project would collapse. Ron knew he needed help. The studio suggested bringing in someone who was trained to handle extreme mental stress. They contacted a man who had worked with U.S. Navy SEALs. His job was to teach soldiers how to stay calm under torture conditions. This trainer met with Jim and taught him techniques to control his breathing, change his focus, and detach from the discomfort. The fact that the production needed a military torture resistance expert to keep the lead actor functioning shows how difficult the situation was. Even with training, the set was not easy. Jim continued to have emotional ups and downs. The crew became tired from trying to support him while also doing their normal work. Ron had to step in many times to calm situations, remind people it was not personal, and keep everyone working together. Some days, Ron directed scenes while also giving emotional support. It took more energy than most films he had ever worked on. He tried to stay kind, but even Ron began to look worn out. The unpredictable behavior also affected filming itself. Jim often changed scenes while performing. He improvised new lines, changed tone in the middle of dialogue, and sometimes ignored the script structure. Normally, this kind of creativity could be useful in comedy, but in this film, where makeup, props, and camera movements had to match exactly, improvisation caused problems. If Jim made sudden changes, the crew had to adjust quickly, sometimes redoing entire setups. This slowed down the pace of production even more. Ron did not want to fight Jim. He valued Jim's talent. He believed Jim could bring something special to the character. But Ron also needed the film to move forward. He tried gentle conversations first. He tried explaining how delays affected everyone. He tried encouraging Jim to use improvisation in ways that still worked with the schedule. Sometimes it helped. Sometimes it did not. Each day felt unpredictable. Behind the scenes, photos from that time show Ron looking tired. He smiled on camera, but the stress is visible. Jim later admitted that the film was one of the hardest periods of his career. He said the costume and schedule pushed him to his limit. He did not intend to cause trouble. He simply could not control the emotional reaction that the costume created. Ron understood this, but the experience had still left a mark. When the movie was finally finished, it became a Christmas classic. Audiences loved it. Jim's performance was praised for its humor and emotion. Many people never knew what happened behind the camera, but Ron did not forget. He had seen how quickly a film could fall apart when emotional stress took over. He learned that even talent and charm cannot replace stability and cooperation. The experience aged him emotionally. He became more careful about which projects he said yes to and which actors he worked with. When interviewers later asked Ron if he would work with Jim Carrey again, Ron answered politely but indirectly. He praised Jim's talent, but he did not express interest in another collaboration. Jim himself said that the role had taken something out of him and that he would not want to go through that again either. There were no loud arguments, no public statements, and no clear blame. Instead, there was silence, a quiet understanding that the experience was powerful, but also painful. This chapter in Ron's career showed how even a beloved actor could create a working environment full of pressure and unpredictability. It also showed how Ron handled difficulty not by yelling or forcing control, but by trying to understand. Yet even understanding has limits. Ron learned that patience can protect peace, but it can also cost too much if the situation never settles. But this wasn't the last time a star's intensity clashed with Ron's calm. The next one was the most powerful actor in Descent, Hollywood at the time, Tom Cruise. When two professionals want excellence but define it differently, sparks don't fly, they burn. When Ron Howard worked with Tom Cruise on Far and Away in 1992, both were at strong points in their careers. Tom was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. His work ethic was known for being intense. He pushed himself, pushed scenes, and pushed everyone around him to match his level of energy. Ron, on the other hand, believed in planning, stability, and keeping a steady environment where everyone could do their best work without chaos. They both wanted the film to be great. They just had very different ideas of how to get there. From the beginning of production, their working styles did not blend smoothly. Tom believed emotion should be raw and powerful. He wanted every scene to feel real, even if it meant doing more takes or changing the blocking at the last moment. He wanted movement, urgency, and intensity in almost every frame. Ron wanted thoughtfulness. He wanted each camera setup to be clear and purposeful. He believed a strong story came from careful pacing and structure. The difference was not personal, it was professional. But when professionalism collides on a film set, the pressure spreads to everyone. During filming in Ireland, there were moments when the tension showed. Tom was deeply involved in every scene. He would ask for changes, question camera positions, and suggest emotional adjustments. He was not trying to be difficult. He simply believed that performance should lead the process. Ron believed the director should lead the process. Neither was wrong, but the lack of shared method caused friction. Ron tried to stay calm and explain his choices. Tom wanted the energy of the moment to guide decisions. This difference created silent strain, and the crew could sense it. The rain scene confrontation became one of the turning points. It was a scene that required careful coordination. Rain machines, lighting, camera movement, and emotional expression all had to work at the same time. The setup took hours. When the moment finally came, Tom stopped in the middle of the take. He took off his gloves and said, "The scene did not feel real." He believed the emotion was missing. The crew froze. Everyone waited for Ron's reaction. Ron told him that realism does not always require chaos. He said that the quiet moments could carry just as much power. It was not an argument full of shouting, but it carried weight. Two visions had met head-on, and neither moved. Nicole Kidman, who was both Tom's co-star and partner at the time, often acted as a quiet bridge between the two. She tried to understand both sides. She knew Tom's intensity came from wanting to give everything to the role. She also saw Ron's exhaustion from trying to keep the film steady. Her presence helped soften some situations, but it also added its own pressure. When two important people in your life are in conflict, even silently, it is impossible not to feel caught between them. People on set later said Nicole worked hard to keep peace, but the tension still hung in the air. Ron did not want to push back aggressively. He had never believed in controlling people through force, but he also knew the film had to move forward. When scenes became unpredictable, Ron started shooting extra coverage. This meant filming more angles and more versions of scenes than he normally would. He did this as protection. If Tom changed the performance from take to take, Ron wanted enough footage to piece together the best version in editing. This was not something Ron normally did. It was a sign of how uncertain the production had become. Despite these challenges, the film was completed. Far and Away received mixed reactions, but the performances were praised. To the audience, nothing seemed wrong, but behind the scenes, the experience had left a mark. Ron respected Tom's talent and dedication. Tom respected Ron's steady leadership, but both understood that working together had required emotional effort that went beyond the normal demands of a movie. Ron did not speak negatively about Tom. He did not tell stories or criticize him. That was not his way. But he also did not seek another collaboration. The difference in working styles was too strong. The stress of trying to blend two very different approaches was something Ron did not want to repeat. He had learned during Cinderella Man that emotional strain could affect his health and peace. He did not want to experience that again, even for another strong performance. Tom continued to build his career with intensity and drive, working with directors who matched his fast, high-energy style. Ron continued to work with actors and crews who valued calm structure and steady leadership. Both succeeded in different ways. The experience simply showed that not everyone fits together, even at the highest levels of talent. Sometimes two professionals can admire each other and still not work well side by side. This chapter in Ron's career demonstrated that conflict does not always come from anger or disrespect. Sometimes it comes from two different visions, trying to exist in the same space. It showed that even shared goals can lead to tension when the methods are not aligned. Ron walked away with respect, but also with a clearer understanding of what he needed in order to protect his peace while working. But where crews battled for realism, the next actor battled for control. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson didn't walk onto a set, he walked onto a throne. When Ron Howard worked with Gibson on Ransom in 1996, Gibson had just come off major success. He had won Oscars for Braveheart as both actor and director. Because of that, he carried a strong sense of confidence. He was used to calling the shots. He was used to being listened to. On Ransom, he was not the director, Ron was. But Gibson's behavior often suggested that he believed the film needed two directors, and he wanted to be one of them. At first, Ron respected Gibson's experience. Gibson had proven he could create strong performances and powerful films. Ron was open to hearing ideas, and in the early days, some discussions were useful. But very soon, Gibson's influence became more than suggestions. He began changing scenes on the spot. He would rewrite lines minutes before filming. Sometimes he would ignore the prepared script entirely and say what he felt worked better. Ron would try to explain the reasoning behind certain scenes, but Gibson pushed ahead with what he believed was right. Blocking became another point of tension. Blocking means how actors move through a scene. Ron planned movements carefully so the camera, lighting, and emotional tone all worked together. Gibson would step in and shift things on his own. He would change where he stood, how he delivered a line, or how he interacted with another actor. He did this without warning. When the star changes blocking in the middle of filming, the entire crew has to adjust quickly. Lights, marks, camera angles, all of it must shift. This caused stress and confusion. Some takes had to be restarted multiple times. It slowed down progress and added pressure to everyone on set. Ron did not shout or argue. That was not his style, but he also could not let the film fall apart. So he used a quiet strategy. He began shooting backup takes. After doing a scene how Gibson wanted it, Ron would request one more version for safety. In reality, this meant he was filming a version that matched his original vision, so he could save the movie in the editing room later. The crew understood what he was doing. They saw him protecting the film without openly challenging Gibson's control. Gibson, being a seasoned actor and director, noticed Ron's quiet adjustments. This added another layer of tension. Gibson believed he understood what would make the strongest emotional impact. Ron believed in a balanced, thoughtful structure. Neither wanted to lose the film's focus, but the atmosphere became heavy. The pressure was not only between Gibson and Ron, it reached everyone who worked there. Crew members felt nervous when Gibson entered a scene because they did not know if the plan would stay the same. Some actors felt unsure about how to respond when blocking changed suddenly. Ron tried to hold everything steady while still keeping the environment respectful. Despite the struggle, both men were professionals. They finished the film. Ransom was well received. The performances were powerful, but the cost behind the scenes was real. The emotional effort Ron had to use to keep peace was draining. He later said that Ransom was one of the most exhausting experiences of his directing career. Not because of the story, not because of the schedule, but because he had to constantly balance leadership and patience while dealing with someone who was used to being in complete control, Ron learned something important during this time. He realized that not every talented actor fits the working environment he wants to create. He did not want his sets to feel like battlegrounds for authority. He believed filmmaking should be collaborative. He believed that everyone should feel safe to contribute. Gibson's style of working did not allow that. It centered the film around one strong personality, and that personality was not the director. Ron understood that this was not healthy for him, the crew, or the final process of making a film. After the movie's release, Ron and Gibson did not continue any professional relationship. They did not speak publicly about conflict. There were no statements or interviews accusing one another, but those who worked close to the production understood. Ron avoided situations where he would have to fight for control again. He chose projects and actors where communication, trust, and structure were valued. Gibson continued working in Hollywood, directing and acting in intense roles. Ron continued his steady career, building films that came from patience and teamwork. Their paths did not cross again. The separation was quiet, but it was final. This experience showed Ron that sometimes talent and recognition do not make a person easier to work with. Sometimes success makes collaboration harder because confidence can turn into dominance. It taught Ron that protecting his work and peace matters more than trying to accommodate every personality, no matter how skilled they are. But if Gibson clashed out of ego, the next clash came from something stranger: myth meeting reality. Marlon Brando. They say, never meet your heroes. Ron met his and watched the legend crumble in front of him. Marlon Brando was considered one of the greatest actors in film history. He changed acting forever with his natural, emotional performances. Ron Howard grew up watching him. So when the chance came to work with Brando in the mid-1990 seconds, Ron felt excited and honored. He expected to learn from a master. Instead, he found himself in one of the most difficult situations of his career. Brando was no longer the same actor people remembered from The Godfather or On the Waterfront. His habits and approach to acting had changed. He did not like memorizing lines anymore. He refused to rehearse. Ron planned scenes carefully, expecting a normal working process. But when shooting began, Brando said he didn't want to learn dialogue. He told the crew to place cue cards all over the set. They were taped to walls, furniture, props, even the bodies of crew members sometimes. Brando would look around during a scene, glancing at these cards to read his lines. This made it very hard for other actors to keep their performances natural. Brando also disappeared without warning. One day, he would be friendly and talkative. The next day, he would not show up on set for hours. The crew didn't know where he went or when he would come back. Production could not move forward without him because he was in the main scenes. Some days the set was ready, cameras were waiting, everyone was prepared, and Brando was simply gone. Ron tried to stay patient. He tried to speak calmly and keep the team focused. But the crew became frustrated and tired. Time was being wasted. Money was being lost. Even when Brando did show up to film, the unpredictability continued. Sometimes during a scene, he would suddenly change his voice. He would use an accent that was not written in the script and did not match the character. The accent might be unclear, exaggerated, or simply strange. Nobody knew why. When Ron asked him about the accent, Brando responded vaguely or laughed it off. It made the performance confusing and made the tone of the scene inconsistent. Ron tried to guide him back to the original vision of the character, but Brando did not respond to direction. He did what he felt in the moment, without thinking about the bigger picture. Ron realized that he could not shape the performance. He could not lead the scene. He was directing, but Brando was not letting himself be directed. This was painful for Ron, especially because he had respected Brando for so long. Working with a legend should have been meaningful and inspiring. Instead, It was stressful and draining. Ron had to balance his admiration with the reality in front of him. The legend was not helping the film. He was making it fall apart. As filming continued, the situation worsened. Brando's lack of consistency and disappearing behavior caused major delays. Scenes were canceled or rescheduled. Crew members stood around waiting, unsure if progress was possible. The atmosphere became heavy. People whispered quietly on set, confused and worried. Ron felt responsible for the film's survival, but he also knew he could not force Brando to cooperate. He was facing something bigger than a professional disagreement. He was facing a person who no longer cared about the process. Eventually, the production could not continue. The schedule broke. The story lost shape. The film fell apart before it could be finished. For Ron, this was not just a professional setback. It was personal. He had believed that working with one of his heroes would be a highlight of his career. Instead, he felt embarrassed. The studio was disappointed. Crew members had wasted weeks of work, and Ron was left to carry the responsibility in silence. Ron did not speak publicly about the situation. He did not criticize Brando in interviews. He did not blame him, but the experience left a mark. It taught Ron that talent does not always stay steady through time. A legend can change. A hero can decline. Respect can turn into confusion and pain. It reminded Ron that filmmaking is not only about skill, it is also about reliability, trust, and shared effort. Brando, at that stage in his life, was unpredictable and uninterested in structure. Ron needed stability. The two could not meet in the middle. The collapse of the production felt like a lesson Ron never wanted to repeat. He learned that admiration alone cannot make a collaboration work. Even the greatest actors cannot save a film if they are not willing to be part of the process. The experience changed Ron. He became more careful when choosing actors. He understood that reputation is not enough to guarantee a good working relationship. He looked not only at talent, but at attitude, discipline, and respect for the team. But conflict doesn't always come from chaos. Sometimes it comes wrapped in a charming smile and a perfect suit. Hugh Grant. Not all battles are loud. Some are won with sarcasm. Ron Howard's situation with Hugh Grant was different from the past clashes. There was no shouting on set, no schedule delays, and no emotional breakdowns. The conflict happened before any camera was turned on. It started during a simple script meeting that was supposed to be friendly and professional. Ron was considering Hugh Grant for a role in a romantic drama project under his production company. Hugh was well known for his British charm, humor, and calm delivery. Ron respected his work and believed his acting style could add something special to the film. But the meeting changed that opinion quickly. Hugh arrived with a relaxed attitude, but his behavior soon felt dismissive. When Ron talked about the emotional core of the story, Hugh responded with jokes that did not fit the moment. He made comments about how American films rely too much on emotional speeches and dramatic moments. He said that American directors always need everything to be felt so obviously, implying that subtlety was missing. His tone was not gentle, it was sharp, like humor used as a blade. Ron stayed calm and explained that the story needed honest, emotional expression, not exaggerated drama. But Hugh continued to comment in a way that looked down on the script, rather than engaging with it. The difference between them became clear. Hugh believed emotional storytelling should be clever, witty, and controlled. Ron believed it should be sincere and direct, allowing the audience to connect without feeling distanced. Hugh saw the script as something that needed to be made more ironic or smart. Ron saw it as a story built on human warmth and vulnerability. Neither view was wrong, but they did not fit together. As the conversation went on, Hugh's tone became more openly critical. He questioned lines in the script, not to improve them, but to mock how sentimental they were. He laughed at parts that Ron thought were meaningful. Ron realized that the emotional tone of the film would not survive if Hugh led the performance. Ron ended the meeting politely. He simply said they might be looking for different approaches. He smiled and thanked Hugh for his time. Hugh left without thinking much of it. To him, it was just a conversation. But Ron had already made his decision. He did not move forward with the casting. He replaced Hugh with another actor who understood the emotional tone he was trying to create. There was no argument, no dramatic ending, just a quiet separation. Later on, Hugh was interviewed and made comments about American directors being too serious and too earnest. He did not name Ron directly, but many people believed he was referring to him. Industry insiders who knew about the meeting understood the connection immediately. Ron did not respond. He did not mention Hugh publicly. He simply continued working on his films. But those who worked with Ron knew that Hugh's name would not reappear in any of his casting discussions again. This situation taught Ron that conflict does not only come from loud personalities or chaotic behavior. Sometimes it comes from differences in values. Ron believed films should bring people closer to their emotions. Hugh believed distance and cleverness made better storytelling. These opposing approaches could not work in the same film. If they had continued, it would have turned into a difficult collaboration, just like the others Ron had experienced. But this time, Ron recognized the problem early and stepped back before stress or damage could happen. The lesson was simple. The tone of a film comes from shared belief, not just talent. Even a skilled actor can shift the heart of a story if they do not respect its core. But the final name on Ron's silent blacklist? He didn't even try. He refused before the handshake ever happened. Chevy Chase. Some fires you don't walk into. You recognize the smoke and stay away. Ron Howard never worked with Chevy Chase, not because of a personal clash, but because he already understood what the experience would be like. By the time Ron reached the height of his directing career, Chevy had a reputation in Hollywood that was well known. He was funny on screen, smart, and had strong comedic timing. But behind the scenes, many directors and actors found him difficult. He had a history of arguing with co-stars, disrespecting writers, and ignoring direction. He often believed his way was the best way, and he did not hesitate to let others know it. Ron had heard the stories. Directors warned each other in private conversations, not out of gossip, but out of professional caution. Several crew members who had worked with Chevy described him as unpredictable, sharp-tongued, and impatient. There were stories of him getting into arguments on Saturday Night Live, openly insulting cast members. Later, during the show Community, he walked off set multiple times and criticized the writing staff. He didn't just disagree, he made disagreements personal. He had a sense of humor that could easily turn into a weapon. And when that sharp side came out, it could damage the atmosphere of an entire set. Ron takes the mood of a set seriously. He believes filmmaking depends on trust, clear communication, and shared effort. If the atmosphere is filled with tension, it affects every shot, every performance, every decision. Ron does not like working in chaos. Chevy, on the other hand, seemed to almost invite it. He clashed with people not because of lack of talent, but because he did not handle differences gently. Ron knew that if their styles met, it would not be a small disagreement. It would turn into a working environment where no one felt stable. The moment that confirmed Ron's decision came when Universal once suggested a big-budget comedy pairing between him and Chevy. The studio believed Ron could manage Chevy's strong personality the same way he had handled other difficult actors. They thought his calm nature would balance things out, but Ron immediately refused. There was no testing period, no script discussions, no meeting arranged. Ron simply said no. He already knew what working with Chevy would bring: constant pushback, unpredictable behavior, and an environment where the crew would be on edge. Ron didn't want to spend months on a set trying to hold everything together. He had done that before. He had worked with actors who challenged direction, rewrote scenes, or caused emotional tension. He understood the cost. His calmness was not endless. It needed to be protected. Saying no to Chevy was not about ego. It was about avoiding a situation that was guaranteed to drain him. It was a decision based on self-awareness and experience. When Chevy heard that Ron had refused the collaboration, he reportedly joked about it at a party. He said Ron only works with nice guys and added that it must be boring to direct films without chaos. Ron's response was simple. That's the point. He meant it. He did not direct to deal with battles, arguments, or personality fights. He directed because he cared about the story and the work. He believed filmmaking should not damage the people making it. This moment shows how Ron's blacklist was not just about bad experiences. It was also about preventing more of them. After working with strong personalities who drained him emotionally, Ron learned to identify the signs early. If someone did not value cooperation, respect, or stability, they would not fit on his set. It did not matter how famous or talented they were. The decision to avoid working with Chevy Chase was not loud, dramatic, or angry. It was quiet and firm. Ron simply recognized that not every collaboration is worth the cost. Some people change the entire emotional tone of a workplace, and Ron had decided that he would no longer sacrifice his peace and the well-being of his crew for the sake of a star's reputation. After all these battles, Hollywood expected Ron to break, but what he did next shocked them all. The real story isn't who Ron refused, it's what those refusals protected. After working with strong and difficult personalities, Ron Howard did not turn angry or hard. He did not complain in interviews or blame anyone. He stayed polite, steady, and respectful. But something inside him changed. He learned that being calm does not mean accepting every challenge or letting others lead the set. It means knowing when to step back to protect yourself and the people who work with you. These experiences shaped how Ron leads. He became clearer about choosing actors who respect teamwork. He began to look for people who cared about cooperation, not just their own performance. He made sure his sets were places where everyone could work without fear of sudden emotional storms. He valued communication and stability even more than before. If someone brought constant conflict, he simply did not work with them again. He did not need to argue or prove anything. He just protected his work and peace quietly. This approach is part of why Ron's career has lasted so long. Hollywood changes constantly. Trends come and go, stars rise and fall. But Ron stayed steady because he created an environment where people actually wanted to return. Actors and crew members trusted him. They knew he listened. They knew he did not waste their time with unnecessary stress. They knew he respected their effort. However, staying the calm one had its emotional cost. When you hold peace for others, you carry pressure inside. Ron rarely reacted when someone challenged him. He did not push back aggressively, but silently managing tension is tiring. The struggles with Crowe, Carrey, Cruise, Gibson, Brando, and others took more energy than most people saw. Ron looked calm on the surface, but the stress of keeping everything together weighed on him. He learned to hide frustration and protect others from feeling it. That takes strength, but it also takes pieces of a person over time. Ron's quiet refusal to become bitter is one of the most meaningful parts of his story. Many people in Hollywood who experience conflict develop resentment, ego, or anger. Ron did not. Instead, he became clearer about his boundaries. He did not talk bad about the actors who made his work difficult. He did not turn the situations into public drama. He simply chose peace by making careful decisions in the future. He understood that leadership is not about control. It is about stability, trust, and consistency. By refusing to let conflict define him, Ron protected not only his films, but also his identity. He kept his reputation as a calm and respectful director because he knew that peace requires active choices, not just good intentions. He also protected the mental health of his crews, who depended on him to maintain structure during long and hard productions. The biggest lesson from Ron's experiences is that kindness is not the same as weakness. Being calm does not mean being passive. Ron's calmness was discipline. It was a decision to not let chaos take over. It was a choice to step back from relationships that harmed the work and the people involved. He learned that you can care about your craft without giving up your well-being to satisfy someone else's ego. So what does this say about Ron Howard, about fame, about power, and about us? Kindness is not the absence of boundaries. Sometimes it is the courage to draw them. Many people believe that being the good one means never upsetting anyone, never saying no, and always staying gentle no matter what happens. But Ron Howard's story shows a different truth. Being calm does not mean letting others take control. Being respectful does not mean accepting disrespect. And being kind does not mean allowing chaos to damage the work you care about. Throughout his career, Ron faced actors with strong personalities, strong emotions, and strong egos. Some believed passion meant pushing others. Some believed talent justified difficult behavior. Some simply could not work in a structured environment. Ron could have tried to match their intensity. He could have yelled back, argued, and fought for control in loud ways. But that was not who he was. Instead, he stayed steady. He protected himself and the people around him by stepping away when things went too far. That choice was not weakness. It took strength. Collaboration in art is not easy. Everyone comes with their own ideas, habits, and pride. A film set is a place where those beliefs meet. Sometimes they blend, sometimes they clash. Ron understood that a film could only succeed if everyone respected the process. He believed in shared effort, not personal dominance. He believed a director's role is to guide, not to crush. His calmness was not something he was born with. It was something he practiced every day, especially when faced with challenges. The price of being the good one is often invisible. It means holding stress inside so others can keep working. It means choosing silence when arguing back would only make things worse. It means letting go of opportunities with certain actors, even when the result could be a powerful film, because peace matters more than the final product. It means trusting your own values, even when others don't understand them. But the reward is also real. Ron still has one of the most stable, respected careers in Hollywood. People enjoy working with him. They trust him. His films continue to reach audiences because they are made in an environment where people feel supported, not controlled. So the question becomes bigger than Ron. It becomes about us. When we face conflict, do we believe calmness is weakness? Or do we understand that calmness is a choice? Would we rather win an argument or protect our peace? Share what you think. Do you believe kindness is strength? Or does the world push us to become harder to survive?